And as some of you will no doubt know, Keith Wallace has been organizing exhibitions since 1979 in this province and across the country. He's worked as a director curator at the Contemporary Art Gallery from 1994 to 2001. He curated many exhibitions and projects there, including solo shows by Canadian artists who have gone on to become some of the most well-known artists from the country, such as Liz Magor and Brian Youngin in 1999 and 2001, and international artists such as the Thai artist Navin Rawanchaikol and Indian artist Vivan Sundaram and Sunil Gupta in the late 90s. And from 2005 to 2007, Keith was the associate director and curator at the Morris and Helen Balkin Art Gallery at UBC, where he curated a number of international shows, including some really important exhibitions of Latin American and Caribbean art. And most recently, Keith has been editor-in-chief at Yishu Journal for Contemporary Art, Contemporary Chinese Art. So it's really extraordinary, the work and the range and the groundbreaking work that he's done in the country. He's no stranger to Indian contemporary art. He's curated some other shows beyond the Gupta and the Sundaram. Among them, in 2004, an exhibition called Resonance, Contemporary Art from New Delhi with Anita Dubey and Subodh Gupta. So we're thrilled to have Keith here with us for this newest exhibition of his at the Surrey Art Gallery, his premier exhibition at the Surrey Art Gallery. Please welcome Keith Wallace.
Thank you all for coming out tonight. It's great to see you, and I'm really pleased. I'm honored that you have come to join us here. I do want to thank the Surrey Art Gallery for taking on this project. It's a very welcoming place. It has a very professional staff. Their exhibitions always look fantastically beautiful. And I really appreciate all the support that they have given. And you know, this gallery has a very strong reputation across the country, and it's a Class A gallery, which means it's up with all the major galleries and museums across the country. So when I'm just going to give a little bit of brief comments about the exhibition and why I wanted it to be at the Surrey Art Gallery, and I think it's probably pretty obvious. Surrey and Fraser Valley have a very large Punjabi population, and this just seemed the right place to do it and to make it accessible for a lot of people who may not go into Vancouver to see an exhibition, but to have it right here in their own community. So it was very natural for the Surrey Art Gallery. Now, Rajesh and I met in 2019, I think was the first time, and we came across these sculptures and water tanks at very different times, under different circumstances. The first time I saw them was in 2006 when I was going through the Punjab, and I had no idea what they were, but I was absolutely fascinated. And they were lodged in the back of my mind for many years, and the idea of the exhibition came up when I was speaking with a curator in New Delhi who knew of Rajesh's work, and I went to see his work at the gallery that represents him, Photo Inc. in New Delhi, and made contact with him and felt that this was a show that had to come to Surrey for a number of reasons, not only because there's the huge Punjabi population, but for the non-Punjabi population, I would say 99% of them know nothing about these sculptures. And they're quite unique. For me, I haven't seen anything like it anywhere else, and I felt it was really important to bring them to this community so people who know the Punjab and go back to the Punjab can see their villages here in Surrey. And I think that's a very kind of special experience. So I'm going to introduce Rajesh. And we traveled together in 2019 we spent a week and we visited 40 villages. Rajesh has been to 150 over a longer period of time than I've spent there. So in 1979, he graduated in visual communications from the National Institute of Design in Ahmedabad, India. And he, over the last 3 decades, has developed a really strong reputation as an architectural photographer. And he's been published in Domus, Architectural Design, Inside Outside, Dezeen, Arch Daily, as well as for architectural monographs and anthologies. He's also pursued his own projects. And I think in his talk, he's going to go into his architectural work and move into the work he's done here. And his personal projects have dealt with urban issues, religious and cultural traditions, and localized vernacular expressions, of which this exhibition is. And his work has been exhibited in India, France, the United States, Canary Islands, the Netherlands, and now, with much pleasure, in Canada. And I would also say that this is the first time these photographs have been exhibited outside of India. So Surrey's on the spot here. And I also, my final comment before Rajesh comes up, when we were traveling, it was really extraordinary how many people there knew of Surrey. So, and I think he was quite taken aback. It's like, Surrey? Why does everybody know Surrey? So Rajesh, I would like to invite you up to the stage to start your talk.
Sat Sri Akal, Namaste, good evening. I'll start my talk on a cloud winter morning in 2014, standing in front of the houses with sculpted water tanks in the villages of Punjab's Doabas region in India. I had no idea that for the next 5 years, it would become a part of my life and develop into a project. Trained as a designer and practicing as a documentary and architecture photographer, documenting the cultural expression and vernacular style of these houses came naturally to me. While photographing these domestic sculptural monuments, I always dreamt of one day meeting the owners and getting approval of, as I call them, their house portraits. After all, their creation had inspired my ongoing project, Everyday Monuments. Coming from India, today is a special day when I'm here in Canada with my labor of love of my photographs. I sincerely thank Alison Raja, Jordan Strom of Surrey Art Gallery for inviting me, and Reese Edwards, Survey Bynes, Charlene Back, Chris Dean, and Scott for all their help and support. I would like to especially thank guest curator Keith Wallace, who believed in what I was doing and patiently waited for 3 years for this day. Traveling with him in Punjab during my last trip in 2019, with his deep interest in art and culture, cultural expression, and vernacular architecture, we learned a lot. An idea of an exhibition emerged. It was postponed due to the pandemic, but it only made me more anxious to be here, and I hope to find a few owners of these houses and share their stories. When I asked myself why I ended up embarking on this project, it seems I have come a full circle. I remember back in 1979, as a student, I had photo documented a community from rural India who would migrate to the city to do manual work. I observed that amongst the many things they would do back in their village after years of saving money was to build their modest house. Today, photographing these dream homes of Punjabi immigrants, popularly known as non-resident Indian or NRI houses, I see a parallel that can be celebrated. I'm now going to show you 3 emblematic examples of my architecture photography assignments to provide some background to my practice. Historically, monuments were built by kings and politicians that illustrated an idea or something they wanted to promote or commemorate. During my architecture photography assignments for contemporary architects, photographing their projects, there was something to learn from these buildings. Translating the architect's ideas and their manifestations through my camera lens improved my understanding of build space, the judicial use of materials, functionality, and the relationship with the environment. Working with my dependable tripod and light as my friend, I took a liking to the slow, calculated process of photographing architecture. I enjoy the wait. The buildings, which in themselves can be considered monuments, are solidly grounded, waiting for a photographer's interpretation. My interest in geometry and forms also found an expression working with this form of photography. While photographing, it is vital to move swiftly with the light and selective perspective to bring out a spatial awareness between the objects within the frame and their relationship with the surroundings. The process of clicking the image while remaining decisive could happen in a moment or end up postponed during long intervals before the right moment is captured. It was teaching me to be patient. You will see the subtlety of these moments while photographing the following architectural projects. Beitur Roof Mosque, the project I'm showing now, was designed by architect Marina Tabassum for a site in a densely populated neighborhood of Bangladeshi capital, Dhaka. A colonnade, a group of light wells and perforated brickwork allow light and air to reach the prayer hall to this mosque, which is one of the winners of the Aga Khan Award for Architecture 2016. Light is also used to mark the Qibla, which is identified by a vertical slit in the cylindrical brick wall that is visible through a large opening in the wall of the prayer hall. As Marina adds, the quality of space and architecture in this project proves that with the use of local materials and dedicated craftsmen, an attempt towards spirituality through light can span the distance between here and infinity, between today and eternity. The SEPT library in Ahmedabad, designed by Rahul Malhotra Architects, is housed on 3 floors below ground and 2 above, with 3 distinct spaces layered within each other like the rings of a tree that fulfill the basic concept of the building. The first layer, the skin of the building, has louvered facade that can be adjusted manually to allow in less light or more ventilation in response to Ahmedabad's severely hot and dry climate. The second layer is made of wide interior spaces meant to flood the structure with light and create an intermediate space between the skin and the core. The final layer, or the library core, is made of steel and glass along with concrete and contains the stacks of books and the more private reading areas. The interconnectedness of these different layers through staircases results in a variety of spaces that allow for greater convenience and flexibility within the library usage. As Rahul notes, in this way, the building serves as a hands-on laboratory for students to experiment with the principles of passive ventilation, lighting, and traditional cooling systems in South Asia. The Druk White Lotus School, designed by Arup Associates from London, provides education to over 800 pupils. It was conceived as a model for sustainable development in the Ladakh region, situated at an altitude of 3,500 meters, withstanding extreme temperatures and earthquakes. The design combines local materials and traditional construction techniques with leading-edge environmental design. Arup adds that our brief was to create a campus that would celebrate and enhance local values, while at the same time making the most of cutting-edge technology and construction methods from the West. Now I'll come to something else. Living in a metropolis like Mumbai, one cannot ignore the existing of huge informal housing settlements, often dramatically existing alongside the formal housing. The artisans who build these everyday affordable homes contribute greatly to lessening India's unprecedented housing shortage, but their contribution hardly receives any recognition. What they create is never photographed or celebrated. Documenting these homes, which were constantly being improved upon, was an experience totally different from the houses built by professionals. Its do-it-yourself approach, the choice of material, and the imaginative improvisation of the fundamental concept of a house attracted me. Then there are other kinds of untraditional monuments, once looking very much like the Bollywood movie sets that emerge in Mumbai during festivals and celebrations, monuments that appear only to disappear. They suggest a temporal articulation and occupation of a space, defining limits in a dense urban environment. Like Punjab's sculpted water tanks, which are created by local artists, these monuments, an annual phenomenon, were built by the lesser-known set designers. Documenting the temporal quality and perception in different avatars, I could distinctly read the set designer's spatial expression and observe the aspirations of the devotees visiting these monuments through my photographs. But there was an aspiration of another kind that led me to Punjab's rooftop sculptures. In 2014, while traveling in the state on an assignment documenting stories about global migration, I witnessed a unique scene. At a place of worship popularly known as the Airplane Gurudwara in the town of Talan near Jalandhar, devotees offered plastic toy planes in the hope of quickly obtaining a visa to leave India. While there, I heard rumors of successful immigrants returning to the village and placing a sculpture of an airplane upon the newly built homes, which was a more fascinating story for me. The toy planes are a symbol of hope, while the sculptures are a symbol of achieving that hope. Thus, I began my journey in discovering these houses. It wasn't always easy to find these houses crowned with sculpted water tanks. I had neither map, GPS, guide, address, nor any available research to help me find them. Even though Ram Pratap, my taxi driver from Jalandhar, the largest city in Dwaba, offered to assist in my search, I still had doubts about successfully locating them. He could neither read nor write, but his greatest qualification were that he could speak Punjabi and he traveled to various parts of the Dwaba region, ferrying NRIs from Amritsar International Airport to their villages. Traveling the national highways and taking the day tours on the village roads, from a distance I noticed that these sculpted airplane water tanks in different sizes and shapes had a dominant presence in rural Punjab skyline. I was so obsessed with the rumored airplanes on the houses that I overlooked the numerous other sculpted water tanks. Shifting my focus, I soon discovered sculpted water tanks in the shape of army tanks, vehicles, footballs, weightlifters, whiskey bottles, pots, teacups, falcons, lotuses, horses, and many more other such unaspected objects. It reminded me how Vila and Bernd Becker described the subjects of the photographs. They said, we photograph water towers and furnaces because they are honest. They are functional and they reflect what they do. That is what we liked. A person always is what she or he wants to be, never what she or he is. Even an animal usually plays a role in front of the camera. Echoing this sentiment, as I photographed these domestic sculpture monuments, I noticed the evolving architectural style of these houses, built by unknown, locally known artisans called mistris, and even by an enterprising owner of the house. The early vernacular style of the house, using local materials and expressions, varying from region to region, had found an innovative adaptation of global ideas translated by NRI's understanding of a home. This even seems to have influenced some local artisans, giving birth to a style of architecture in rural Punjab that is yet to find its name, maybe Videshi architecture, foreign architecture, or even NRI architecture. While I was greatly attracted to these houses, I knew that understanding this architectural style would require an independent study. So I returned my attention to photographing my subjects, the sculptural water tanks, and architectural embellishments. Seeing them brought to my mind the different turbans people in India would adorn themselves with the beginning in the 11th century, indicating the various social class, caste, region, and the occasion it was being worn for. On top of these houses, I metaphorically had found these fantastic headdresses, and now I was faced with the challenge how to photograph them. One has to be lucky to find and meet the owners of these houses, who usually return to Punjab in the winter months from whatever part of the world they have migrated to. My best choice remained to treat the sculpture like an outdoor studio portrait and exercise a certain restraint and regard for the subject. Traveling with my tripod and with Punjab's hazy blue winter sky as the backdrop, the photographic style slowly emerged. One of taking outdoor portraits of the houses adorned with their various turbans. I could see the documentation becoming a record of a particular historical cultural period and of a diaspora's ethnic and architectural artifacts. It was vital for me to be face to face with my subject, and climbing up on top of the rooftop terrace of a house located opposite was the best option. But with some homes remaining locked, I missed photographing a few subjects. I had no regret, as it taught me to accept the reality and move forward, as I was sure there were surprises ahead. I would knock on the door of the houses that were occupied and which lodged either caretakers or elderly family members in a corner room on the ground floor. Explaining my purpose, I would request to go up the balcony, take a peep from a higher floor window opening, or step onto the rooftop terrace, to which I was never refused. A cup of Punjabi chai and biscuits would frequently be offered before my mission, and an invitation for roti, freshly cooked meal after the assignment. Someone would accompany me or simply give instruction about the staircase to climb, and even give me the door keys to meet my awaiting subject. When I could not access the higher point to photograph the water tanks, they suggested alternate routes, and when that too failed, they would entertain me with stories. Look at the muzzle of the tank, it's pointing towards Pakistan. He was a chef in New Zealand and built a water tank in the shape of a pressure cooker. His grandfather was the first to own a tractor in the village. Their hospitality touched me. Slowly, as I learned how best to access my subjects, the next big assignment was to photographing as many sculpted water tanks as possible, applying my outdoor studio portrait style. At the same time, I was also conscious of photographing these houses with the context of their rural surroundings. To catch the soft light, I would travel to Amritsar from Mumbai in the winter months and keep my base in Jalandhar. With 6 trips and having just 34 days at my disposal, traveling in over 150 villages to photograph these sculpted water tanks was a process that required planning, method, intuition, and lots of luck. Visiting the airplane Gurudwara, I think I too had a blessing, not with the hope of receiving a visa to enter Punjab villages, but with the challenge of finding my subjects. Making a quick decision once in my outdoor studio was the need of the hour, and I enjoyed the process that came with my long experience working as an architectural photographer. I had to climb stairs, jump terraces to catch the perfect light, and define my perspective in order to locate an ideal framing for the image. Sometimes just changing the camera angle or approaching from different direction had its rewards. The play of foreground, background, and the decision to change the vantage point had its advantages. At times, the views, both long shots and close-ups, had their distinctive presence, giving me a choice between a contextual and a portrait style of documentation. While thinking about displaying this series of photographs for an exhibition, it was more manageable to show the individual contextual images of the sculpted water tanks on the houses, but presenting their handsome portraits was my next challenge. The idea of organizing my photographs into typologies was my choice for two reasons: to enable objective comparison of subjects with similar visuals, styles, and to create a relationship between the sculpted water tanks crafted by over 25 to 30 artists working in the Doaba region. The subtle changes in stylization illustrated by the use of typologies would elevate these everyday monuments and not only put them on a pedestal, but also bring out their raw aesthetic beauty. With my early studies of the typologies of the sculpted water tanks, I realized that working with the uniform grid to reshape the perception, to heighten the focus, and transform these objects into a thing of art was turning out for me to be an unsatisfactory approach. It visually lacked the energy and dominance of the sculpted water tanks atop the NRI houses. The skyscape of my favorite village, Paddi Khalsa, a vast stage with sculpted water tanks as performers, kept haunting me and inspired me to break away from my grid's rigidity and be more playful with the photographic typologies. My styles evolved simply by shifting the axis or varying the size of the images. Arranging these photographic typologies into an exhibition came naturally to create a syncopated visual experience with the framed works serving as punctuation marks. Having witnessed the NRI home's sculpted water tank phenomenon that has evolved over 5 decades in Punjab, I wondered how long it would continue and what new forms would it emerge. Would the next generation born outside India be interested in maintaining these homes or building new homes with their own aspirational sculpture water tanks? Would the local residents or people from the other castes and communities start a new trend? Or will their fate be like the 18th to 20th century Rajasthan Shekhawati Havelis of wealthy Marwadi merchants, or the 19th century's palatial homes of the Tamil Nadu's Chettiar traders that were later abandoned, demolished, or repurposed? Thank you.
These sculptures are very difficult to kind of categorize as to what they are, especially within the art world. The artisans, for the most part, didn't go to art school. They have gone through an apprenticeship with either somebody who's an elder or even somebody in their own family. So it really kind of follows a folk and craft condition, situation that is typical of many kind of village cultures. So yes, they do have studios, and if you go into the side gallery in the exhibition, there are some images of the artisans that we went to visit, and you can see some of the pieces in process. Now, if they are really big, the sculptures are generally taken up to the roof by pulleys and ropes and things like that. If they're really big, they may be taken up in parts and finished on the roof itself, and the painting completed, etc. And there's a client-artist relationship as well, and clients often come to the artist with an idea of what they would like to have on their roof. And they will come with a drawing or a picture, a photograph perhaps. And a lot of these sculptures are related to family and family stories. So there is a relationship between the client and the artisan, and that's how they...
The photo was selected to show how people have, what are the aspirations they have, or the professions they choose to show on their houses. The person who owns the house, he runs a sports academy or kind of training school in Birmingham. So he wanted to use it as a symbol of his kind of a billboard advertisement to his pride, whatever you call it. So most of these sculpted water tanks has their own story. It's more about either about their aspirations, their profession, or the life they want to celebrate.
I'm just wondering, are they still making more of these monuments? Say in the last 5 years, are people still being put in the mud?
Yeah, the trend still continues. I mean, you won't find elevated water tanks now. There are two kinds of water tanks. One which contains the water, and one there's a water tank, and there's embellishment put on top. So now I find in the last few years, more and more people are putting embellishment on the water tank. And I've just noticed it's not happening in Punjab, but it's also now the neighboring states of Punjab, like Haryana, Uttar Pradesh, people are trying to replicate this phenomenon or this style, whatever you call it.
It's really delightful to see these sculptures and to see them in the context of each other and the dialogue that they're creating amongst the members who own the houses. My question is, are these homes seasonal homes? Are these homes permanent homes? Are there people in the audience here who own these homes?
So most of these homes were kind of, after the immigrants went back after 10 years or 15 years, most of the homes were rebuilt. Some were kind of refurbished, some were freshly built, and the tanks happened on top of them. Is that your question?
I'm wondering if these are if people are living in them permanently now. Are people living in these homes permanently now?
Oh, no, I found most of the houses were closed and they were occupied only during the winter times. When the immigrants will go back either for weddings or for celebrations, so for a month or two they'll be occupied. Rest of the time there'll be a caretaker to take care of them, or some member of the family will stay and take care of the houses. So some of them maintained quite well, I would say.
The other question I had was, are there people in the audience who own some of these houses?
I can explain a bit on it. Just a note. So you might have seen that most of these pictures were airplanes, and he also mentioned there's a Gurdwara which is called the airplane Gurdwara. So what I feel like, this is not a story of hope, this is a story of hopelessness. The houses, they are abandoned, the villages, big villages, they are completely abandoned. Either they are now the foreign workers from other states, they live there, or just the elders of that home, they live there. So you would go into that village and see so many great houses, so many colors and everything, but no one's there. So there's a big exodus, as you guys might be already might be aware of, to go out of Punjab. I would call it an exodus, and pretty much everyone in the community is now calling it an exodus, to pretty much anywhere but India. Mainly Canada, if not Canada, then Australia, if not Australia, then UK. So yeah, that's how I see it, and yeah, not sure what can be done about it, or if anything could be done about it.
From where did you take your inspiration? What is the source of your inspiration?
My inspiration? Well, I think for me it was something that I'd never seen before. And so that created a curiosity. And I'm from Vancouver, and I've known there's been a very strong Punjabi population here, but I was completely unaware of these. And they were a unique kind of a cultural expression for me. And I felt that it was important to bring it back to Vancouver so that everybody could share that and learn something more. It's about sharing and it's learning. It's not about making any kind of judgment. There's no judgment there. It is what it is. It's not about good taste, it's not about bad taste. It is what it is, and I think that's way more interesting.
Keith, can I add to this? I think it was important for me to document this period, which happened from 1980s to 2002 to 20, because in India we don't have this habit of archiving vernacular architecture. We document the contemporary architecture, modern architecture, but nobody goes down and photographs vernacular architecture. So I felt it very important because these houses, suppose they're demolished after 20 years, there's no record of these houses. So for me, it's very valuable to show them.
Rajesh, thank you for your good work and thank you for your beautiful photography, and Keith for curating this. For us as Punjabis living abroad, there's a lot of emotional ties to the country and to the province of Punjab and to our villages, and you've brought those villages to Surrey. And when I saw some of the pictures, I would say, "Oh, I've seen that house with the big bird on top." So I think there are so many layers and layers to this architecture and the reason that these are done. And I'm really interested in hearing, you were saying it's hard to pinpoint and say, what is this? Why are people doing this? What do we call this? How do we name it? Is it NRI architecture that we're going to call it down the road? I do feel there's as you said, a period, 20 years, but I do feel it has longevity. Like it's, as you say, well maintained, it's always painted, there people go back, and even if they don't go back, they call a painter and say, go paint the house. So there's lots of really invested, both culture as well as history and heritage and philanthropy and success. There's so many stories in the tanks. And yes, they're functional, but they tell a story. And I wonder how you felt when you walked in those little alleys in the villages. Did you feel the stories coming out to you? Were they talking to you? Did you get a sense? Because you're also not from Punjab. So coming from Maharashtra and coming to Punjab, you felt like an outsider? Did you thought this was very foreign? What were your feelings?
For me, I'm a visual artist, so for me it was very fascinating to see this kind of stuff which I never seen before. And as I kept moving, I thought this end, but it never ended. So there's a lot of surprise for me every time I went there. And what I was touched about their people's hospitality. I mean, they will open doors and they will point fingers, go here. So sometimes in fact I have to say that I could refuse because I had no time to document all this work. And it's
One of the things you mentioned was you hope that you will meet some of those families that live in those. Have you met anyone yet?
We met one family they live in Vancouver. In fact, Keith found them and we invited them. I don't know if they come today, but I'm sure they'll come. We'll find many more in the galleries here and we can share with them.
I'm curious about the cars. We have a sense of what the airplanes are about, and religious symbols have a certain logic to them. But what about the cars? People don't use cars to migrate, do they? They might, but I mean, they seem like an aspirational thing, or maybe it's a statement that they already bought one. I don't know. What do you have any idea what that was about?
Well, I think from what I understand, most of the cars there are Maruttis, and Maruttis were the first domestically designed and built automobile. And I think it was like these sculptures are like they're emblematic and they're symbolic. So perhaps they bought a Marutti, and they're very proud of it. And cars became available really only in the last 25, 30 years to a larger population. So, and what Satvinder said, these are stories. These sculptures are stories about families, and most of them are related in some way to the families who built the houses and commissioned the sculptures. So, yeah, I really think that it's a symbol of pride and it's a symbol of family.
Hi, in answer to your question, so I don't own any one of these houses, but I'm from that area, Duaba region, from Phagwara, Jandiala, Manjki. From the list, I can recognize at least 20-30 villages, and I visited those villages. So I immigrated in 2003. I could see a few of these monuments, but now in 2019 they have exponentially increased. What I feel is when we used to live there, they used to be the landmark. After 10 years or 20 years of hard work in foreign land, when they save money and build a house, and from Delhi when they ask the taxi person, where do you want to go? I want to go to the house with airplane, with the tank and all. So they are kind of the landmark and the pride of saving for 20-30 years. So I don't see any downfall. It's a celebration of their whole life saving. And it's commendable that in 2003, I used to travel from Phagwara to Ludhiana, Delhi. I used to work there. So there were not many, but now and seeing them here now, I can feel that nostalgia, as if I'm walking through the lanes of my villages. Thank you for bringing it.
I'm just wondering, you've seen so many of the structures. Are there any that stand out for you as your personal favorites?
I mean, there are so many of them. And it's hard to find one that stands out. I mean, I think the different ones stand out for different reasons. And Rajesh has, really designed the exhibition and the installation, and he has these kind of thematic clusters. And I think that for me, they represent a kind of abundance. And I mean, if you just had a line of some photographs, it would be like, oh, there's that sculpture, there's that sculpture, but there's a lot of them. And in terms of one standing out, I think actually, in terms of the photographs, I think some of the skylines stand out for me, where you see all those sculptures and that kind of syncopated skyline with all these sculptures, and then there's the architecture underneath it. And I found that very interesting. And sort of the abundance, and when you went, sometimes you would go to a village and there might be one or two, and sometimes you would go to a village and there would be 10 or 20. So it's not about particular one standing out for me, anyways, because there's just such a variety there.
I was looking for one with a camera, I never found one. So my best one is still the Statue of Liberty.
Rajesh and Keith, thank you very much for bringing our historical parts to Surrey. Just why, how it happened. Little bit part of our history. All people came to Canada, and they were not allowed to come to Canada. So Indians have been in Canada since early 1900s. 1906 is when native people, lots of people came over, but they were not allowed to live here, or they were not allowed to have their families here. Until in the later 60s, that's when the families were able to come over. So in the mindset of the people who were here, they always went back. Canada was not their home. So when they went back, they wanted to show the people around them where they be. Not only in Canada, same thing in UK. So where these water tanks actually started from, the UK people started coming in the early 50s there, and in their case as well, they were not allowed to bring their families. So the people went back to their homes, and the families were not just husband and wife and kids. It was husband and wife, their brothers, and their parents. It was a big family. Like you would be having, if you had less than 10 people living in the house, you had a small family. So now one person of the family is working anywhere. They go back and build those houses for those families. the times change. Now our needs change. I personally, we went to build a house when my father retired in the late 70s from Canada, and they wanted to stay 6 months in India, 6 months here. So we built a house. We already had a house, but we built a house for them. So, and that's what they did until 80s, 90s, and until 2010. So for 30 years, they had Canada and India as their home base, 6 months there, 6 months there. And that's what they basically, pretty much in every house, that's what happened. But now, everybody is secure, everybody has the rights. Now they're able to live in Canada, able to study in Canada, and their base basically is, this is their home country. In the 70s and 80s, and even late 90s, these countries were not your home-based countries. So the people actually went back to India and started buying investment, started building houses. Where now the future generation, they're building houses here, Australia, UK. So these houses that are there, they're in a way we wish our kids go to see it, or our grandchildren go to see it. So that's part of the story, how I feel it happened. And when I was talking to Keith, he asked lots of questions in the past. How does this work? How does this work? And even now, the people who are here in Surrey, I would say 40% of the development that happens in their own villages. Those are people abroad in our eyes. And even the government of Punjab, they will fund you. If somebody sends $10,000 from here, government will give you $10,000 or rupees equal, and you can say, this is what I want to build. So that's how the developments happen.
Thank you. And I think we'll just wrap up the questions. We're going to be in the gallery, so if people have other questions, please feel free to come up and speak with us. We would love to chat further. Thank you very much.